Heaven's Feel from a production and story standpoint is to me the most interesting of the three routes. It's essentially a sick fusion of Illya's cancelled route into Sakura's. While it isn't her route, Heaven's Feel certainly does give a lot more to talk about with her character, especially in her relation to Shiro, as the route will explore just how far the two are willing to go for one another given time for a meaningful connection to form. If this is the first part of this series you're seeing, while it's not required, I've made videos of her character progression in the Fate route and UBW that'll help clarify some points brought up here. Also important to note is that the Heaven's Feel movies aren't all out as of writing this, and in terms of Illya's character, differ greatly from the source material which I'll largely cover here, as well as elements from the other routes and parts of Fate Zero. This one's going to be a bit longer, but it goes without saying that this route means the most for her character, and is the culmination of everything that goes into forming the core of Illya Seville von Einsburn. While the fight with Berserker on the third day and the meetup with Illya on the first is largely the same as the Fate route, the first deviation comes in the form of Zoken asking how the Einsburn girl is. While Shiro will piece together that it was the girl who gave him the warning later, for now it sets aside a piece of his mind early on to think about Illya. As such, even after their initial confrontation where he loses a good chunk of his innards, Shiro doesn't want to fight Illya. He knows that's wrong given the terrifying power she has at her command, but he knows she has some relation to him and doesn't want to come face to face with her in a conflict because of that. While it conflicts with his ideals as Illya is shown to be a harmful force, he is compelled to protect her regardless of what may come, to the point of arguing with Ren on the matter and avoiding the idea of cooperation between the two due to it. Later in the story, when talking to Saber in the dojo, he brings her up again. Upon hearing the name Einsburn, Saber tells him to go see Kotomine. Here he learns the truth of the last Grail War, and part of the reason Illya had a vendetta against him. Shiro still hasn't connected the dots that Illya is Kuritsugu's daughter, but this interaction with Kirei will be a big factor in their later interaction, where Shiro will give many more thoughts past, "This girl is so sweet and innocent." The realization of why she's after him assaults his steeled mind, and he's unsure on how to cope. So, like we tend to see Shiro do in stressful situations, he turns off all but the most basic emotions and analyzes the situation. The setup of why Illya wants to attack him, paired with Shiro's failing resolve due to him learning the girl's history, make a nice pair. Repeatedly he thinks back to the Einsburn family name in their 1,000-year quest for the Grail, the war 10 years ago, and of course, Illya from this point onward. It fills his mind before and after battle as an unavoidable truth which he can't accept, stating it in a matter-of-fact manner over and over again in his mind. Most other things just fly through his head as he quickly accepts them as reality, and if all this happened any later in the route, his mind would be too preoccupied with other things. But as it stands now, he simply cannot forget about it. Illya being on his mind far more than any route before, it's no coincidence that he meets the Snowy Princess days earlier than he did in the Fate route. True to form, she greets him with an "Oni-chan," and the atmosphere reflects what Shiro is feeling right now. The music is tense. You could cut the tension with a knife. Shiro believes he's about to die, confused as to why the one most likely to kill him would be, well, here shopping. This continues until Shiro accidentally refers to her as Illya. Shiro can't fathom what it means to her to have someone else call her by that name. She's genuinely taken aback. In this route, we can imagine that she's in a very similar mindset that she was in the Fate route. Slightly emotionally vulnerable due to the conflict in her heart and seeking answers and reconciliation. Shiro, however, is not in the same mindset as his alternative universe self, so the thoughts that have been setting in the back of his mind begin to come into play. Illya, upon hearing all of this, wants to know Shiro's name. The playfully calling him Oni-chan won't do in this situation. He called her by Illya, so she wants to call him by his own name. Their conversation, through this simple action, can now go well beyond the surface level interaction it might have otherwise had. Illya is ready to open up just a little bit. She takes a liking to the name Shiro and disregards the Emiya part, disassociating him with the man who never came back and embraces him immediately after. She wants that emotional connection as soon as possible, someone she can talk to beyond a basic level. Even if she knowingly disregards the Emiya aspect, she still likely sees a bit of the old Kuritsugu in Shiro. Illya says she'd kill Kuritsugu on the spot if she had the chance, and I don't doubt that. But upon doing so, I guarantee that it'd feel more shallow to her than Shiro getting disemboweled by Berserker 10 times over. If their conversation here had continued the way it did in the Fate route, she would have continued with the same possessive mentality she had. However, where he had to be coerced into the idea last time, here Shiro actually wanted to talk to her as well. Illya is elated at the prospect of Shiro agreeing to speak with her, and even more that he wanted to talk with her in the first place. While her childish persona is generally an act she plays up, a lot of the time in Heavensfeel, it's more of a legitimate happiness that's called forth in moments like this. She can't wait to go to the park and talk to him, to find out more about him and dig beyond her own preconceived notions. Shiro watches as she dances through the city streets towards the park that will become their usual meetup point. He accepts the situation, not beating it against his steeled mind, but accepting it wholeheartedly. Part of him wanted this to begin with, so what's the harm? This park represents Illya's current attachments. It's her and Shiro, no one else. Berserker does eventually call her back in the Fate route, and that's her other emotional tie. But Berserker is also her duty as a master, so to fulfill that duty is to leave Shiro. As her mindset is torn between the two roles, it's fitting that she and him be the only ones here at this desolate park. What should be a place of fun is a place of isolation and emptiness. A place that is longing to be filled with others, just as her castle is much the same. If said castle is Illya as a master, the park is her playful persona. Somewhere where she and Shiro can be on an even playing field, carefree and away from the Grail War. Illya doesn't even have anything she wants to talk about. She just wanted his company, so the topic of conversation is pointless. She'll learn more about him regardless of what they talk about. The conversation for the first part is mainly small talk, but goes rather amicably, all things considered. Seizing this opportunity, Illya asks the question she wants to know the answer to most right now. Something she asks in a playful way just in case things go bad. She asks Shiro if he likes her. Shiro, flustered at this, brings up her trying to kill him and the Grail War. He immediately regrets bringing it up, however, as what follows are tears from Illya. She wants to legitimately know if he likes her. It's the question that would naturally pop to the top of her head when given the floor. Even if it's a brazen question loaded with unsureness on both their parts, she has to know if he's talking to her out of obligation or if he wants to get to know her better. Illya is conflicted, hiding behind that playful mask. Sure, she's happy, but she also has that insecurity seeping to the surface at all times. Shiro has the war on his mind due to his history with her and the history he's just learned yesterday. Of course his response would contain it. He wanted to forget about it, but, like Illya can't magically forget about the past 10 years. He can't. It's because of that guttural response that she again dejects, saying that if she didn't call off Berserker, he would have died for sure. It's not much, but admittedly she is right. Shiro is as good as new, and in his mind, though it was a terrifying experience, he sees it as no harm, no foul. All this in mind, Shiro responds that he doesn't hate her and that he wants to get to know her better. That she's like a little sister to him, much to Illya's delight. That was everything she could have wanted out of this conversation. Each of them likes and to an extent wants to protect the other, leading to any future meeting between the two not being a one-sided affair. From this point on, their conversation drifts into meaningless ramblings. As I said earlier though, those ramblings mean the world to Illya. As long as she gets to find out more about Shiro, then that's all she cares about. This tone in conversation continues until Shiro gets to the one thing he wanted to ask about from the start. He unknowingly asks about her father and his, Emiya Kuritsugu. Her immediate reaction is to deny the truth and leave the park, until she takes a second to calm down and not be so childish about it. She turns back towards him and says that she does know who Kuritsugu is, but offers no more clarification. 2 days ago she was passionate about the matter, using Berserker to kill the son who Kuritsugu deemed better than her. In the Heavensfeel movies, she's literally dancing in a fit of passion at the matter. Here, however, she states it matter-of-factly, as if she's thinking about it over and over again in her mind, running through the thought process again and again. Just like Shiro. Kuritsugu's gone, her revenge felt hollow, and now Shiro is wanting to get close to her. He even went so far as saying he wanted to see her again despite what happened. It's natural that she's more conflicted on the matter than she has been in the entire visual novel. The pair's conflicting emotions running rampant, they still want to see each other again and develop their connection further. Both of them now have thoughts and feelings they both want to reach some kind of resolution. And with both of them taking the first steps to get there through this conversation, it's no wonder they look forward to their next meeting, in spite of conflicting thoughts. A meeting which they plan for the very next day. After buying her a gift, he heads to the park and laments that he didn't find her there. Illya pulls something akin to her actions in the Fate route. casting magic on Shiro when he tries to get up and leave. Taking the fate route into account, this comes off as, oh, the same thing's gonna happen. But it doesn't, and that gives the readers much more to think about. After all, why wouldn't she kidnap him here like she had prior? As stated earlier, where the reader only saw her mainly at a surface level in the fate route, she saw Shiro as largely the same, whereas in Heavensfeel you get to look beyond the surface, causing Illya to do the same with Shiro. As you look more into her through him, she looks more into you. She doesn't see Shiro as an object of affection she can't let go, but as a person. As soon as Shiro gets free, Illya begins to lecture him on how his future is dim if he can't dispel such a simple thing. This is the first instance of many where we see Illya acting as an older sister to Shiro. She picks up the role of the guide he was for her in the fate route. After the mini lesson, Illya is shown to be genuinely shocked that Shiro followed up on his promise to see her. To push aside those ever-present feelings of resentment and love, Shiro offers her the gift he picked up prior, a taiyaki, and they both sit down next to each other and talk. Where Shiro had the floor last time, Illya is the one opening up here. This interaction, small as it may be, serves to break down the barriers between the two further. Here, Illya is quite obviously more vulnerable to Shiro, present not only in her body language and manner of speaking, but how, when they finally do talk about her, she's genuinely happy. No facade of acting innocent, here she is ecstatic to finally have someone to open up to. These pointless conversations may have the visage of small talk, but that goes a long way for someone who spent the past 10 years undergoing hell and struggling with loneliness and longing. Because of all this, her resolve to protect Shiro, not just possessing him, but protecting him like a loved one, is formed. As Shiro wants to do the same right back to her, the point of living situations is brought up. He wants to know where she lives in case of emergency. During said house sharing session, the first instance of Illya's final role in this route, the third dress, Heavensfeel, is brought up. It's just a little mention, but that, as well as a peek into what that magic would look like with Illya transferring his consciousness to get a look at the Einsburn castle, set the groundwork for what's to come not feeling forced. After Shiro memorizes the layout to get there, Illya shows that she's not afraid to brag about her magic prowess, and begins to teach him more stuff about that world. It's over basic stuff, but Illya seems happy to be teaching Shiro something for once, smiling through the process. A little more time passes and the two part at the bell toll. Illya asks if he'll come to see her tomorrow, with the fear of rejection in her eyes. Shiro naturally thinks she's stupid for even asking such a thing, as he wants to see her too and show her his home. They've gotten about as close as they can talking in the park, which, while representing Illya, was even standing for the two. Regardless of what's going on, and knowing that Illya is still a master with a history that should make her hate him, Shiro wants to let her in and give her acceptance. The next time they meet, the conflicted feelings at the epicenter of Illya's mind will be washed away.
イリアは待っていられるかい？お父さんが帰ってくるまで寂しくても我慢できるかい？じゃあ父さんも約束する。必ず。
A promise made, doomed to be broken. The girl was hopeful for what was to come, but now that a similar promise has been made years later, she's worried about the prospect of what might happen if he actually doesn't like her, if she's gotten her hopes up again. In Shiro fashion, he naturally forgets to visit her the next day. His tilt-a-whirl of thoughts and emotions causes him to start walking home completely spaced out until he reaches the intersection, where Illya finally gets a hold of him, worried that he had written her off. Seeing that look of dejection and sadness, Shiro decides to make good on his promise of inviting Illya to his home. It's a simple gesture of apology to a friend, but it says 1,000 words. But Illya gets visibly conflicted on the proposal. She's at a turning point for her character, having a fragile view on trust and being that open with someone. Just as important, she knows this is her last chance to confirm whether Karitsugu is still around or not. Her thoughts right now are just as conflicted as Shiro's, so she wants an answer of sincerity, not just to appease her, but something they both mutually agree to and want. A turn of events strikingly different from the fate route, in which Illya coming over was a matter of practicality and protectiveness on Shiro's part, and her keeping on her facade of the innocent little girl for the rest of the route is extremely telling of that. A facade that has all but faded away in Heavensfeel. Similarly to Shiro in the prior talk they had, Illya steals her mind and brings up her role in the Grail War and her vendetta against him and Karitsugu. Like her father, she's putting other people first and killing off her emotions. Her responding like this only pushes Shiro further, reaffirming that he has to make amends on Kuritsugu's behalf. With him being brought up so much, Illya elects to call Shiro Oni-chan instead of by his name, the first clue that something's up with the visit. Where her initial response was to flee at the mention of Kuritsugu last time, here she decides to confront it, to take the first steps towards accepting reality and not letting it control all of her decisions. However, she's still too afraid to confront that reality head on. So, as she did in the Fate route, she puts on the front of the innocent little girl to hide her emotions. The change in her personality being a jarring contrast to seconds before as she goes to face the last remnants of the reason she did everything for the last decade. Upon entering the household, Illya's ecstatic persona falters a bit, as it slowly breaks way to one of timidness and optimism. She's genuinely curious about everything around here. It's an opportunity not only to find out more about Shiro, but her own father. Her last chance to find him if he is still around. By being here, she begins to accept not only the Kuritsugu part of Shiro, but herself. Illya learns here that there's value outside of the Grill War and her grudge. There's life, love, and a place to call home. The Winter Castle offered none of these things to her, so she's testing out the waters and feeling things out. Each room they explore familiarizes her with a new part of herself she's just discovered. It's an exploration that's short-lived but sweet. Their meeting here has Shiro taking the role of the older one, who guides her through these confusing thoughts and rooms. Each room, as she so elegantly remarks, is strange to her. The house is small and has many obvious openings, but that makes it all the more worthwhile to protect. As the exploration goes on, she goes from confused about it, to comparing it to her own, to genuinely loving it. What started out as a chance meeting that likely shouldn't have happened has turned into something the snowy-haired girl could have never expected. A while after the exploration, Illya begins to look down. The time between the two of them has been fun, but the house is empty. No one's here. No one but her and Shiro. Kuritsugu is really dead. She's entering the last stage of loss, from depression into acceptance. Through the tears falling down her face, she's growing as a person. She finally moves on from all of her preconceived notions and grudges. The winter snow starts to melt, and the two part ways as better people. The two don't meet again until the 9th day of the route, where Shiro, distraught at what he has to do with Sakura, heads out to clear his head while her procedure is underway. He goes to a place of clarity to him, a place that feels comforting yet isolated, the park. He's at a point where he's more conflicted than ever, so who should show up to help him but Illya? Illya, like usual, greets Shiro cheerfully and a playful demeanor. As a side note, it's notable that it's nighttime and Illya didn't bring Berserker with her, like masters typically would at night, showing that she's done some self-reflection over the past day or so. In contrast to her playful attitude, Shiro gets frustrated at her and tries to disregard Illya so that he can be on his own and think, bringing up the Grail War when they had already gotten past it. Illya, likely recognizing her own tactics in his actions, tries to make Shiro feel better in two ways. One, by being cheerful and saying that the Grail War is almost over, that she practically has it in the bag due to the current circumstances, with no clue as to what they mean for Shiro. But when Shiro snaps at her for this, she tries a different method. Calmly, she consoles him. Where Shiro acted as the older sibling last time, here Illya is the one being protective of him, and showing him the kindness he showed her. She recognizes that he's on the edge right now. She fully accepts him and says that she'll be on his side no matter what he chooses. Illya has grown past everything that was tying her down into someone who can protect others. This moment is why Shiro can stay sane, why he doesn't snap under all the pressure, and why he can't abandon his ideals. Illya is being the parent she lacked, consoling and almost crying Shiro. She doesn't want to see someone she loves look like that. Regardless of what he chose, Shiro felt like nobody would be on his side in this situation. But she will be. She'll be there to support him no matter what because he helped her. People brought up with my Cherry Blossoms Dream video that Fate's Stay Night is a story about growing up. Well, if you ask me, Illya is the biggest yet most subtle example of this. She has had the biggest growth emotionally of anyone up to this point. Because of that, she can give Shiro the courage to make his decision, The choice to be Illya's superhero is the one I will always lament the loss of, but once Shiro makes this choice, regardless of which, she stays by his side and tells him to go live by his dream. To do things for the one he loves. Even if it's the choice Kiritsugu would have made, she still abides by being his ally regardless of what may come. The little bit of life and heaven she's found with him is worth it to her. From here, the two depart, with Illya smiling as Shiro abandons his 10-year-long dream. After the events of the previous night, Shiro has full trust in Illya. As such, when he and Sakura are in search of allies, it's not Ren that pops into his head first, but her. Now that they've reconciled their personal grudges, why not the external ones that caused their meeting in the first place? He has full trust in her that she'll say yes after all. Here we get an intermission with Illya, where she and Berserker flee the castle. The shadow's closing in, and she knows running is the only option, even if right into Zoken. When she sees the decrepit old magus, her demeanor changes. She knows Zoken isn't the hellish enemy, and she hops onto the ground to confront him about the messed up war. Illya, operating as a master in her element, is calm and confident, more so since those personal issues have been put at ease. Her and Zoken talk about the truth behind the war, and Zoken's motives for why he's doing what he is, with Illya taking a firm stance on his actions, telling him why seeking eternal life is cowardly. She still very much has two sides to her, that of the master of the Einsburn and that of Illya Sveel. The two can cross paths and interact, but they will remain separate. It's easier to operate when you cut out emotions from your actions as a master. Not to say she's cutting them all out, but it's clear to see that here she's being way more calculated than she is when she deals with Shiro. When Berserker starts fighting Salter, said calculating nature from a moment before gives way to a more vulnerable one. Berserker is one of the reasons she's made it as far as she has, and protecting that is vital to her. However, just like in UBW, that dream will be too good to come to fruition, and Berserker loses the battle. Unlike UBW, however, Shiro has the power to save Illya. Their bond would have likely not let anyone stop him even if they tried. Illya has the same disposition as Shiro. If he's willing to risk his life and protect her, then Ilya's actions to give herself over to Salter and Zoken can only be the same. She, despite her usual cheery demeanor, has a defeatist mentality, evident clearly in this fight. When it comes to protecting who she loves, even if she can't do much on her own, she will willingly throw her life away after admitting defeat. When Berserker was on the edge, she tried to throw it away to protect him, and here she's throwing it away to protect Shiro. Her history of never winning puts her at either overconfident or utterly defeated as a master. In the Fate route, Shiro banked on that overconfidence to win. In UBW, that defeatist part got her killed. Here in Heavensfeel, she'll have to reconcile the two, or suffer the same fate. Not bothering to take her contemplation into account, Shiro takes her hand and they begin to flee. Archer stops the two and tells Shiro to protect Illya until the very end. Though they've had very different experiences, Archer is ultimately Shiro. Even if it was only the Fate route for Archer, he and Illya still formed a bond that is clearly important to him. This Emiya likely had to watch Illya die a few months or so after the war. That had to have had an effect on shaping the man Archer is. Whenever he looks at her, his face is filled with regret at what could have been if he found a way to save her. What could have been if only he tried more for her. But he'll rectify that now, as he stands before the shadow and tries his best to take it down, no matter the cost to his life. The fight against the shadow leads to an explosive finish. Taking the words of Archer into account, Shiro becomes resolute in what he must do. Now that Berserker is gone, he will take the giant's place to protect the red-eyed girl. At this moment, Ren has Archer, but Illya has no one. If no one will be there for her, then he will, even if it cost him an arm. Illya jokingly remarked about Shiro being her servant in the Fate route, but here, for lack of a better phrase, she gets her wish. Shiro, unlike Kiritsugu, would die to protect her. He cradles Illya, and the shadow explodes. His first thoughts upon losing an arm to this is that he overreacted, and that protecting Illya was way more important. The last thing he sees before losing consciousness is a crying, but very much still alive, Illya. When he regains said consciousness, the first thing he sees is the girl he almost died to protect. For Illya, this could have been a night where she lost absolutely everything she had built up. With Berserker gone and Shiro being on the edge, seeing him recover and return to life must have been one of the biggest moments for her. Thus, she's not crying, she's staring at him in wonder for being the only one not to abandon her. Her superhero is still around, and she plans to never let that go again, hugging him and telling him how glad she is that he's still around. She's truly happy in this moment, despite having lost everything else. It's notable how when this happened in the Fate route, she accepted it as a matter of course and kept her guys on. Here, it's the complete opposite. Shiro nearly dying had nothing to do with this, but the connections the two had formed over the past few days had everything to do with it. It's thanks to those genuine heartfelt conversations, sometimes meaningless, sometimes heavy, that Illya is able to be herself right now. Illya says that she'll force Kotomine to add another shroud if she has to, which is literally impossible, but it just goes to show how far Shiro's come to mean to her. If there were any doubts before, this scene washes them away. Illya helps him through the steps to stop the pain, but when he asks her what's going on, what happened, all she can do is freeze up and look away. She wants to protect him and love him, but the fact that he got that injury protecting her rings all the more loudly in her mind because of that. While Illya's done more exploring into her emotions, especially when it comes to Shiro, she just can't find the words if it leads to Shiro potentially hating her. It's irrational, but she knows that if she loses Shiro, she'd be as well off as her last moments in UBW. So even if it's something like this, something that would likely never even happen, she's still reserved. Normally, she can flip those conflicting emotions off like a switch, see Hollow Ataraxia or any other route. But here, her emotions are a storm she has long lost the control to weather. So for one of the first times, she's left speechless. Kirei fills the vacancy and explains why Shiro now has Archer's arm, and is now always a few steps away from death. Once the hard part is explained, Illya calms down and is able to talk to him directly again. The caveat being that she talks to him almost lifelessly. These things need to be said, but she takes no joy in it. She knows that the arm will likely kill him eventually, but she doesn't want to confront it directly. She's in a state of flux until Shiro calls out to her to leave, where she gives a faint smile. Time is now fleeting for the both of them. Before they head out, Shiro invites her over to live at the Emiya residence until the end of the Grail War with everyone. While it would be expected that she'd agree right away, Illya can't accept. This leads to everyone wanting to take her. Kirei for convenience at the end of the war, Ren for formulating a plan, and Shiro because he genuinely cares for her. All this culminating in her declaring that she'll go wherever she wants to go. She's clearly putting on a face here. She wants to go with Shiro, but feels she can't. Illya loves him, but he already has Sakura. Just like a kid, she's trying to ignore the bad, to run from it and reconcile with herself, and maybe return when she's ready to confront it. As she's acting like a little brat, it's only fitting that this situation be resolved in the same manner. Ren prods her into submitting into her childishness by stating how ungrateful it is of her after Shiro did all of what he did for her. Though they argue, Ren and Illya are forming much of the same connection they had in the Fate route, and it's thanks to Ren that Illya decides to go with Shiro. In the Fate route, it was a matter of course, but here, she might have found more of a family than she'd ever had before. On the way home, Illya and Ren split from Shiro, and we see Illya take on what will soon be her role for the rest of the route. Level-headed plot exposition and occasional Shiro support. There's still a few scenes of note, but here's where her attitude for the rest of the route starts to set in. She wants to protect Shiro, but knows she can't get any closer, so she closes herself off like this. It's no wonder why scenes like what happened at the 9th day at the park become more and more rare. Despite a bit of a rift, the two are like siblings at times. The next morning, once things cool down a bit and it's made clear Shiro is alright from his nightmare, Illya becomes relieved and gives a warm smile that could light up a vacant night sky. Both have now acted on their promise to protect the other, and both have reconciled everything. When she teases him, it's not to mess with him. It's in a sly, yet loving way. She doesn't just have a fake personality she uses. Here she shows her genuine self, and for brief instances like this, she is brilliant. After messing with Shiro's fragile concept of adolescence, the topic of breakfast comes up. Shiro being able to cook pancakes makes her elated. A home-cooked meal made by a loving person is something she's never experienced before as well. So this is just another one of the ways the two will deepen their bond and get closer. While that would be a nice scene, this is Sakura's route, so Shiro brings up cooking with her. To which an emotionless Illya returns. Her once brimming feelings locked up tight at the mention of Sakura, who in her eyes isn't suited to Shiro. She gives him a warning about Sakura, and then leaves. She knows she can't change Shiro's mind at this point, or is unwilling because Shiro isn't hers, so why bother? He'll do a lot, but he won't do that for her. Illya viewing him as a sort of a lost cause here certainly isn't helping matters, but the two will at least arrive at the opportunity to heal the wound and move on with that brother-sister dynamic, though their bond won't grow beyond that, which is fitting for this route. She's in an observational role here. She's still trying to get a feel for this new way of life. She's watching everything going on, taking it all in, and seeing how Shiro interacts with other people that aren't her, likely feeling a sense of jealousy that she isn't in a one-on-one situation with him, where she's shown to express her true self more. Until she understands better, she'll silently support him when the need arises. She knows he'd give his life for her if the situation arose, but she's still missing something in her life. Be that affection, a sense of closure in their relationship, or both. Noticing that they're not the only pair of siblings struggling through strained relations, Illya brings up the idea that the two sisters, Rin and Sakura, need something to nudge them in the right direction. When Shiro says that they do like each other regardless of family differences, just like he and Illya, she responds by saying, "Shiro and I are special," in a dejected tone. The comparisons between the two sets can be made, and the list a mile long, but Illya still wants to hold on to the notion that they have something special, that they aren't like other siblings, that they are the way they are because of something deeper. Illya and Shiro continue their banter about the two sisters while beginning to form their own new dynamic. Now that things have calmed down a bit, Illya can go back and forth with Shiro without getting so flustered. She may not have had that moment of reconciliation, but she's still content with where she is, as evidenced by her actions throughout the day, rising from the level of observer into a more active role. Be that simply taking part in more conversations, or willing to listen to Shiro with an open heart and help him through his issues with Sakura. A big step for her considering where she stood on the subject yesterday. Every now and again, glimpses can be seen of that innocent little girl seen in Zero, before the Einstburn ruined her life and birthed her grudges. Illya's in the last stages of letting go that part of herself as well, and as we'll see tomorrow, she is willing to accept her new role, brief as that might be, with open arms. The next dawn soon arrives, and Shiro isn't feeling himself. The first person he runs into, Illya, confronts him on this, seeing how odd it is for him to come out to the shed immediately when he wakes up. It's clear she's done some thinking over the previous night, as her tone is showing concern for Shiro that comes off as sincere. She's given up on those romantic feelings for him, and is now seeking to support him in a different way. This is built upon after she states that she wants to make him breakfast. It's amateurish, but Shiro knows it was likely her first time handling even a toaster, and that it's food that's been made out of a genuine love. To his show of appreciation for the meal, Illya is satisfied. She got what she wanted out of this morning. Shiro and her just having a moment of contentment with each other. It's the first time she's made something for someone else, and that gives her more joy than anything. Joy that's soon cut short by magic training. The topic is Archer's arm and a matter of Shiro's death. Compound that with someone else being in the room besides the pair of siblings, and it's natural that she becomes unaware of how to deal with her emotions, simply stating the facts and nothing more. As shown by her sprites, tone of voice, and the language used, she is in a vastly different state from her contentment from earlier. That share of happiness is now facing her right in the face and saying, "I'm one step away from death and actively running." An instinctual defense for someone not ready to lose what means the world to her. It's no wonder why she hates Sakura under that light. Shiro can't help but want to save her, and that'll ultimately mean his end. It might as well be Kiritsugu all over again. A man she loves chasing his ideals in a direction opposite her. She's so eager to protect him, yet can't do anything to save him. When not repressing her emotions, Illya is seen as visibly melancholic or sad. Isolation is at the door and knocking. From here, the pair go on an almost silent, reflective shopping trip. Once they're done grocery shopping, Illya returns to being her jovial self. Now that all the others aren't around, and the concept of Shiro's death isn't staring her in the face, she's free to express her true feelings. Here more than ever, Illya is open with the idea of the two being siblings, with her showing a smile that hasn't been shown since the time the two spent in the park in the early parts of the route. Illya is elated to be out and about with Shiro, and the two joke around with each other for the first time in ever. Illya is radiating a pureness we haven't seen from her up until this point. Unlike the other routes, it's real, or at least it seems so. She's reached the point where she can be innocent around him sincerely. She's certainly grown up, but here we see the same girl who joyfully played in the snow. She's held on to that bit of humanity she gained in her formative years, but unlike the Fate route, here that humanity has been nurtured further. Through Shiro, she's been able to realize that what she needed was someone to love her again. As cliche as it sounds, the coldness got washed away when he held out a hand, and that bitter winter of her life turned into a calm snowfall, blissful in all its actions, but still ready to turn into a blizzard at any moment. Effectively, she's become the best parts of her parents. Where she was an emotionally cut-off doll of the Einsburn, here she is filled with emotion and willing to protect what's dear to her. As she's learned to grow up and forgive those grudges, she can be really and honestly happy again. Shiro, the one person she thought she hated, whom she thought was the reason her father never came home, is bringing the light back to her life. And she lights up Shiro's life as well. Illya gets lost in the moment and starts singing. The song is representative of everything she's feeling in that moment. Joyful, yet reserved. Her singing, every bit as unrefined as her cooking, implies that she's rarely sang the song for anyone else. Her demeanor implies that she's enjoying this last reprieve to the fullest. It's a song she would have sang with her mother and father had they still been around, but now she still gets to share it with family. Yesterday, Shiro noted how Sakura and Ren were like them, but as of now, he's wrong. Shiro and Illya's relationship is that of a genuine sibling bond here. Illya once wanted Shiro gone, but now he's the most important figure in her life, someone she can joke with, have a heart-to-heart with, who she can share this haunting melody with, and someone she can depend on. Illya and Shiro are both enjoying their small moment of happiness together. Moments like this are why Illya needed a route. These two play off each other wonderfully. Exploring her letting go more in depth would be a joy. It's here that she casts off any lingering doubts about the relationship and opens herself up completely. If she gets hurt, she knows she'll survive it. If Shiro gets hurt, she'll be there to help him through it. The two look like a pair of siblings. Like Shiro was able to do on the 9th day in finding consolation in her, Illya can now confide in him the world. They've both realized how far they've come, and Shiro thinks about it. What if he was here? Would the two have always had moments like this? Brief though it may be, it's something the two will cherish for the rest of time. After they start getting closer to the house, Shiro stops Illya to talk. This moment in time is temporary, and they both realize that. So now, regardless of past feelings, he asks her if she'd come live with him after the war. Illya, who had no place to go and was unceremoniously invited in the Fate route, now gets a sincere invitation. Shiro wants to hold on to her for as long as she is able, to let her have somewhere to call home and a loving family, people who care about her and watch over her. At this, she's left frozen. Until she answers, asking emotionlessly if he means that as Kuritsugu's son. If he's doing this out of obligation, then like with the initial invite to the house, she wants nothing to do with it. But this time, Shiro says yes. He's doing this because he's his son, and because he likes her. That's it. He can't give her anything as a father figure, but he can give her the warmth and shelter she's been seeking since it was ripped away from her. They've both avoided the subject out of fear of rejection from the other, but because of Illya's lonely song getting it on his mind, he has to ask her this here and now. Happiness and love, found within living with the family, within day-to-day life. It's not something he's forcing her into, but it's something they both mutually understand is the logical conclusion to their relationship. Shiro watching over and protecting her, and Illya lighting up his life every day. A gentle reminder of that snowfall all those years ago for Illya, a return to innocence and to actually indulge in it. She realizes that she won't have a place after this war. If Shiro's not there, what would be the point? She laments that he didn't ask her all this sooner, saying that things might have turned out differently if he had, that they both could have lived happy lives, but as it stands now, Shiro can only save one, Sakura. His choice was set in stone the moment he abandoned his ideals for her. And now Illya, clinging to what little time they both have left together, plans to love life in the meantime. Even if she hides behind her emotions, even if she can't do anything else, For those brief moments when she has something real, she'll cherish it for as long as she is able. Illya throughout the day is relatively happy with everything going on around her, her ultimate defense at full effect. Lorelei is a melancholic scene to say the least, a scene that had no business being cut out of the second Heavensfield movie, as its inclusion makes Ilya's involvement at the end come together in a much better way than what the third movie will have to pull off. In this scene, Illya is aware of the future ahead, that she'll have to give up on everything or it'll be taken from her regardless. She ignores all of it and enjoys the last day the two will spend in peace. While the past 2 days were a brief haven of growth and contentment for all parties, Sakura still has her downfall, and the route approaches its final chapter. Following said downfall, an interlude starts with Illya wondering what's going to happen. If Shiro makes it back in time from chasing down Sakura, they could run away together. She acknowledges that she's unsure if that's her desire or that of the Einsburn. One of the things not mentioned much at all is Ilya's ties as the Einsburn's last hope. As gloomy and uninterested she gets about the subject of the Grail War, it's something she still feels she has to do out of obligation. Just like she talks about the near future and Shiro's left arm, it's a formality what she isn't too keen on, but it's something she has to do. With the Grail War coming more to a close, she'll be forced to choose between the two, Shiro or fulfilling her role, though the choice she'll make is obvious. Sakura, like Kirei before her, kidnaps Illya in the meantime. She willingly goes along with this, as she knows she'll simply die in the end anyways. But that's not to say it's all gloom from her. She starts playing mind games with Sakura. It's a return to the sadistic side of her that can play on your weaknesses and use and abuse them until you have nothing left. She plants seeds of doubt into Sakura's mind, saying that she's contradicting herself by wanting to harm other people, to which Sakura can't respond. Illya might know a bit about what Sakura is feeling, and is playing with the broken Sakura's emotions to nudge her in the right direction. After all, Ilya's history with the Einsburn isn't pretty. In UBW, we got a taste of how cruel such treatment could be. Sakura underwent a similar experience, though the way each came out of the situation is very telling. Sakura entered the hell from a younger age and had considered herself defeated and cast aside by the Tosaka. Illya had more of a connection to her family, and by that was able to form a grudge. Kuritsugu was the reason she was put through it, is what she believed in, and so she was able to hold on to that little bit of humanity. Sakura had no one and wouldn't put the blame on anyone else. Illya worked through it, acknowledges that she doesn't have long left to live, and hides it behind layers of repression. Sakura is a lot more open about it. Even with everything weighing on her mind, Ilya's feel will still have fun with her life while she has it. Be it her sadistic tendencies, a gentleness, or a sly demeanor capable of messing you up at the most opportune time. These are all Illya, but they're all facades she puts on to hide what's underneath. Despite all those masks, what matters most to her is protecting Shiro. So she goes with Sakura to deal with her so that he can finally rest. She obviously doesn't want this, she can't want this, but she feels it has to be done. One last time, she calls him that name and gives him a fake smile. She calls him Oni-chan. She's putting up a front and thinking about everything that's led up until now. She hasn't called him that in days, but now she's holding no reserves about it. Shiro doesn't want this, but for him to save her would mean his death, and for her to save him means her death. So she goes with the latter in spite of her true desires, and leaves with Sakura. The Winter Princess is resigned to her fate. Nothing will save her from herself. Shiro disregards logic and becomes hell-bent on bringing Illya back. The bonds he's made with her mean more than words could ever express. So even if it means relying on Kirei, he'll do it. Upon infiltration of the castle, Shiro almost immediately comes face to face with Illya. The last time they met, she left with a false smile. Shiro forgets everything else around him. Here and now, he just wants to bring his sister back. They've known each other only a short time, but it would go against everything he's fought for until now, everything he's vowed to never let her experience again. Last time he was powerless to do anything but watch, but now, seeing this girl, this angel before him, he's resolved more than ever. Illya puts on a cold expression and turns him away. but he refuses to let her put on that act any longer. Her idea of handling everything on her own so no one she loves has to suffer is something he can't stand to see from her. It's hypocrisy at its finest, but Shiro will not accept it. He has come to see this girl as his closest ally, someone who's always protected him when things got dark. Time and time again, she's been there to help him through the worst of it. He may have lost an arm protecting her, but that means nothing to him. An arm isn't even a tenth of what he feels he owes her. He doesn't know the full extent of what she's been through, but the boy doesn't want to see her just grin and bear all that suffering any longer. He saw firsthand how she slowly adapted and did away with the chains binding her back. The other day in the market, they may not have spoken many words, but the two found and understood one another. To see Illya reject that, the humanity she's come to know and the feeling she's come to express, hiding them behind a false front and an empty smile. She may have seemed happy with the lie, but he can't accept that anymore. In a guttural response, he slaps her and gives her a reality check. To this, Illya has an outburst. She's been doing all of this to help him, to fulfill her purpose and meaning in life. Shiro didn't choose her, so this is all she has left. It's all she can do, so why does he deny her even that? Shiro just wants what's best for her. It's clear Illya doesn't want to be here, so he'll take her home where she belongs no matter the cost. He doesn't care about her role, what she thinks she has to do, or anything like that. He just wants Illya back. But because he's made an action for her, he's done something to save her from this cruel fate. She can't do anything but smile and walk with him out of the castle. She can't do anything but go along with what she wanted in the first place. Even if this doesn't end well, she's still happy with Shiro's choice. They leave the castle and head into the forest. Once outside, Berserker is unleashed. When they come face to face, she tries to reach him, but this isn't any fairy tale. She won't be able to make any leeway with the mad giant. If he was lost in his madness before, he's doubly so now. To Illya, he was a fatherly figure of sorts. In a sense, this is like a parent attacking their child. To the kid, that's the ultimate betrayal. Illya experienced that before with Kuritsugu, and now she's experiencing it again with Berserker, who's set on taking out her and Shiro. Pushed to the limits on how far he'd go to protect her, Shiro releases the shroud to defeat Berserker. By the time Illya arrives from the crater to stop him from doing something so foolish, the fight is already over. Berserker looks steadfast at Illya, apparently retaining his last bit of affection for her, and Shiro strikes him down. Each time he uses the arm, he will lose a bit of sanity. She knows she's been saved, but she also knows their conversations, their interactions will never be the same. Shiro won't be all there. He'll have lapses in memory, not know what's going on, and the more he uses the arm, which she knows he'll have to, the more she loses the only person who really means anything to her. She's lost Berserker for good, so now she stares at Shiro with nothing to say. She loves him, but she feels like she's already lost him at this moment. Right now he may appear fine, but little by little he'll be lost, deteriorating by the day. The girl who just left a state of conflicted emotions is tossed into a whole new set of confliction. The lapses mentioned earlier show up in spades when they get back to the Emiya residence. He doesn't remember the trip back except for them attaining a ride. Time seems to be passing by without him noticing, but to Illya, things seem to be normal. She notes how energetic he was to cook dinner, which he doesn't even remember preparing or eating. She's playing the part of the sweet girl now. Illya knows how warped Shiro's memories are and how that's going to affect him. If she plays innocent and fills in the gaps, he can stay somewhat sane. However, the reality of the situation is revealed when Shiro leaves the room, as for a brief second, her sprite turns from a joyful one to a sorrowful one. Losing a loved one is something she's always been ready for. She tried to make the sacrifice play, but was refused multiple times by Shiro. So what can she do now but watch? The final hours of the route approach. Shiro, Ren, and Illya work out a strategy to project the gem sword, but to do so requires the use of Illya's memories and Archer's arm. The lapses he already has are more than she would like, so her voice is naturally shaky throughout all of this. The process, though a success, causes Illya to get more emotional than she has all day. Because he looked at unnecessary things like Justice, he had to spend longer with the shroud off. Illya knows it's inevitable, but doesn't want to see it come to fruition if she can help it. Seeing as Shiro was seemingly trying to cut their time short, she berates him before congratulating him on successfully projecting the sword. She let him know the danger, but he did a phenomenal job, and she's not afraid to show that. After the projection, Rin and Shiro are about to go and take the fight to Sakura, but before they leave, Shiro and Illya have a final goodbye. In the last route, Shiro held out hope for Illya. Here in Heavensfield, however, Shiro wants her to stay behind because Illya is his hope. No matter what awaits at the end of this dark night, Shiro knows that he can face it if Illya is alive and waiting back home. It's already too late for him in his mind, so he wants this girl to have a happy life. He doesn't know about her shortened lifespan, but in the time she has left, Shiro wants Illya to be happy, to feel loved. But to Illya, the only person who could offer all of that warmth in any meaningful way is all but gone now. As the last day comes to an end, Illya is faced with a choice wholly dependent on how much the reader chose to bond with her over the route. If enough choices for her were made, then Illya, in the time that Shiro has left, goes back to the castle and dons the dress of heaven in order to do one last thing before her short time is up. Upon facing the Grail, about to destroy everything and himself to save Sakura and everyone else, Illya stops him. One last time, she's going to save his life. The cost is her own, however. The memories the two made in the short time they had changed Illya from a selfish person into a selfless one. She gives Shiro a new life through the meaning he gave her. Without getting to know and understand Illya, this ending is unreachable. For good reason. Illya and Shiro, though not related by blood, have one of the most well put together relationships. The two constantly go back and forth protecting each other, and in this final moment, Illya gives the ultimate sacrifice to save him. It's not something Shiro wanted, but it's something she wanted. Through his broken mind, Shiro is still able to remember the name of the snowy-haired princess who saved him time and time again. In a desperate attempt to put a stop to all of this, he cries out her name frantically, trying to reach out and save her, but he can't. His body is broken and will barely move anymore. Illya in this moment is calm and shows a genuinely happy smile, one that radiates more than any before. She's happy about her choice. By giving her life to save someone else's, it means that life has meaning. Take away the Grail War and vendetta, and Illya came to Fuyuki with nothing. And once that vendetta withered away, a sense of unease set in. She was molded to be the Ainsburn Grail and to be the one to reach the root. But that was just the purpose handed to her by a long-dead family. Illya was aimless in her life. It's why she clung so hard to and was only genuinely happy with Shiro. Due to the events of the war, she never got to make more connections than him. Even if she lived on, she wouldn't have time to be able to. It's a lose-lose situation for her. No matter how she sliced it, she would have lost. But there was one way she could give what she had meaning. Just like making Shiro breakfast was an act of pure love and goodwill, her sacrifice is much the same. It's why she smiles so full of contentment all the way to the end. This is one of the scenes where she is herself, where she has the chance to repay what she has been given. The days leading up to this were bittersweet in that they were short-lived, but while it lasted, it was just that, sweet. After Shiro came to save her from the castle, after he unleashed the shroud and killed his mind to save her, it must have had some effect. The last time she tried to give her life to save Shiro, she was sad by the prospect of having to do it to ensure his safety, knowing that she would never see him again. After everything that has happened, she not only accepts that role, but embraces it without a second thought. If any meaning can be garnered from all this, it's that her life, although small and left alone by those she once loved, is able to turn around and protect the little brother she cherished. Not only protect, but allow him to start a new life, similar to how she was able to start one in the brief haven the two found in each other. Much like Kuritsugu couldn't attain his ideals without Airi, Shiro can't live past this moment and succeed without Illya. It's a beautiful culmination of everything. For the Heavensfield plotline, Illya has the best progression her character could have asked for. For this story, so many things come together in some of the most satisfying writing I've seen in this series. However, if it feels like there's some unanswered plot threads, or that her character is left blatantly incomplete past this point, it's because it is. Heavensfield, for all it offers the character, is the biggest example of why Illya needed a route. The ending she got, while touching, feel shallow for a character who just needed a little more love to become a fulfilled person. Even though she was ultimately fulfilled in her sacrifice and had been struggling with whether or not to follow through with it, it's not the fulfillment anyone else got. Ren, Sakura, and Saber all had natural conclusions, while Illya's was left to the wind. The use of Die Lorelei in this scene is notable not only because it's Illya's song, because it was stated ad nauseum how lonely it is. She's going to be alone and fulfill her purpose, as was always intended by the Ainsburn. She conducted the third sorcery not to reach the root, but for Shiro's sake. With this final action, Illya's involvement with the plot of Fate's Stay Night ends. Now that this journey has reached its end, I hope the point of all this has come across well. Point being that Illya is my favorite character. Not only in Fate, but in anything in general. Through her, I've been able to see someone who I can learn from and relate to on a personal level. Someone who I can look to almost every interaction and learn something new. The way she slowly develops and grows as a person reminds me of the experience I went through when I was younger and am partially still going through today. While we all have our own ways of going about life and growing, the way Illya was able to put herself back together again is just so touching to me in a way I can't describe. Through slowly building connections, she's able to become more than just a lonely girl. While the fulfillment of that arc is never fully seen, as she doesn't really get a resolution in any route, what can be gleaned from what we've got is something I can come to time and time again and always figure out new aspects of her. While her dynamic with Shiro would be further explored in Hollow Ataraxia through some admittedly cute scenes, the side scene during her last days in Heavensfeel never really make an appearance again. With Hollow taking place after every route, technically you could argue that she already got that life she wanted, but a vital piece of the equation is still missing. Her characterization goes much more beyond just an annoying Emoto stereotype. That's just one of the many facets of her character. While everyone in Stay Night is eloquently written, the way Illya is portrayed is by far my personal favorite. It might require some digging, but if you're willing to look beyond that surface level, there's a gem to be found. A character that deserves more than what she ultimately got and has been given since. While the last Heavensfeel movie is yet to be released as of writing this, her treatment in that adaptation was the genesis of this project. Regardless of how the last movie goes, Illya has had nearly all of her scenes cut or changed to remove the vast majority of nuance they once had. Scenes which, as discussed, mean everything from making her character what it is. Without those, what you're left with is a character who feels unnecessary, who feels like filler, and whose motives come across as unclear and contradictory. For people who don't have time to read a rather long visual novel, I completely understand why they would hate the character, honestly. Her best exploration in any adaptation has been in Dean's Stay Night. While it's a fine show, she's ultimately one of the villains in it, and is never really viewed in a positive light until the end, where she picks up the stereotypes she's so criticized for. While each adaptation has its merits, the handling of Illya is rarely ever one of them, which to me is the second biggest shame about the Fate series. From day one, Illya was never given a chance to have her character develop further than in Heavensfeel, which while exploring her character excellently, leaves so much unfinished. So while every heroine has gotten their time in the sun, Illya is still waiting in the night for her dawn to come. Going forward from here, while it has been bleak in a lot of aspects for Stay Night Illya, there's still some hope to be gleaned from recent events. With the reduction of her character in Heavensfeel, an overpriced but admittedly beautiful Die Lorelei music box, and Sotonai and Fate Go, I'm holding out hope that something is done with her character, be that a route in a Fate Stay Night remake 3 decades from now, a manga, a light novel, or even a one-off OVA. I'd be here for it. I love this character, if that wasn't evident by a multi-part video series that's roughly 30,000 words and still growing as I type this. But to see her explored more in depth is something I've always wanted to see since reading Stay Night, to the point where I theorycraft ideas on what her route would look like practically daily at this point. While the handling of her character in the Heavensfeel movies was the catalyst, at the end of the day, this was a passion project for a character I feel strongly about. If you have any thoughts about her character, or your own stories about learning to love, like, or hell, even tolerate her, please leave them in the comments. The discussions that can spring up about her character are honestly some of the best I've had. The most I could ask for with this series is that those watching understand her character, even if just a little, more than before. So, if that's not been the case for you, I would love to clarify any muddled points. It's been an absolute joy to make this haul. I hope you've gotten something out of it, even if just mild enjoyment. As cliche as this stuff comes across, if you like this series, please consider leaving a like and a subscribe. Share it around if you feel inclined, and stick around to see what's next on this channel. As for what that is, well, I'll let the music speak for itself. My name is Sleepy Crest. Illya is a character that means the world to me, and I hope you have a wonderful night.